this present interview now taking place, Bobath influences seem to be a very dominant theme. Yes, it has determined what I also have been involved with. Over time, I have run workshops for therapists in many towns and centres in New Zealand, planned and led 2 Bobath paediatric courses in Hong Kong in the 1980s, and have taught on cerebral palsy courses in Australia and talked at conferences in Australia and New Zealand. However, a return to the real day-to-day work does need mentioning. Clinical work over decades, what a long time, comprised of my own home-based private practice, adults and babies and children with neurological conditions, clinical physiotherapy, consultancy work, clinical educator within special schools, and being a physiotherapist at Wilson Home School and Arahanui, and for longer term at Carlson School for Children with Cerebral Palsy. This involved great teamwork, always learning and sharing, working in homes with parents and carers with their children, or in the playgrounds, or in gymnasiums, or in kindergartens, or whatever setting to ensure teaching others and carryover takes place. I also worked at a great place with a practice called Therapy for Children. So, also, I had about 10 years of class and clinical teaching part-time at Auckland Institute of Technology, as it was then called in the 1970s and 80s. The neurology teaching group was comprised of a very good group of physiotherapists, great in fact, that included Barbara Miller and Margaret Hursley. Class teaching was followed up with clinical on-site teaching with students, so you got to know the students very well. Margaret brought out people like Shirley Stockmeyer and Shirley Salmon from the USA to give us courses because she had those contacts while working with Herman Cabot. Margaret also taught the neuroscience component on our early Bobath courses, and she had a wonderful grasp of not only how to explain concepts clearly, but also to apply theory to clinical practice. So we were a very dynamic, close-knit group and batted many ideas around. Then AIT had a change of administration policy, so decided to remove all part-time clinical tutors. A clump of us had to go. Later, I was contracted by AUT, Auckland University of Technology, as it then became, and for several years taught neuropaediatrics in the classroom only, with no clinical follow-ups. Another place I worked at was Sutherland Unit, now called Rehab Plus, and this was a great opportunity in the late 80s and early 90s to work with teenagers and adults up to 65 with a variety of neurological conditions. It was a valuable experience because it highlighted not only the importance of early and ongoing treatment and management of children or adults with cerebral palsy and allied neurological conditions and other acquired conditions such as head injuries, but also the essential emphasis on daily life tasks and function. I frequently would go early in the morning and work alongside nursing, therapy staff, carers, to assist teaching how a client could do more to help themselves and reach more active potential in getting fitter and stronger by participating more, getting out of bed, sit to stand, stepping and walking into the bathroom, holding and grasping rails that we had to construct instead of being always held or supported, dressing tasks, eating at the table, looking at their alignment and posture and how they ate. All these were valuable experiences for me. We also ran fun but structured groups with an emphasis on active upright participation and useful mobility activities. Some of the influences of my time in Hungary at a 6-week international conductive education course was reflected in how we ran these dynamic groups, organising therapists, staff and carers to assist and work with the clients out of their wheelchairs so they could see what they were capable of. Now, with research evidence on the importance of strength, fitness training and gym work where applicable for young teenagers and adults, these would be also an important component of programs today, more than it was in those days. I did go to Hungary twice to explore what conductive education was all about, how it worked, so that I had more of an appreciation of the positives of that approach, and if it did at all link in with the Bobath concept. The group programs observed at the Peto Institute Budapest for children with cerebral palsy of all types and abilities, and the adults with neurological problems, were very dynamic, interactive, motivating, and success for achievement noted. The programs were structured in a holistic way to include the individual needs of each child. The fact that the conductors were trained teachers, but educators with a specialised movement background and training who understood what each child needed to function optimally in basic daily living skills. Functional routines occurred throughout the day with the least supportive equipment, and no wheelchairs were integrated into preschool or class teaching. Even Mrs. Bobath found her association way back in the 1950s with Professor Andreas Peto very interesting, with open dialogue between the two and each having great respect for each other. So, for me, that was an interesting exploration of ideas and seeing the positives. However, one of the difficulties with such a functional approach was that there is still a need for conductors to appreciate what physiotherapists know about alignment and biomechanics and current movement science, so that core knowledge can be shared for the benefit of the children, especially those who are more severely involved. They need more supportive equipment, such as good splinting, footwear, seating and standing frames. Currently, there is the perception that a more open approach where therapists and conductors can share more information and coordinate more in the future, and this will be welcomed. I was fortunate to be asked to be a consultant physiotherapy 6 times to the PACE Centre in Aylesbury, UK, and this stands for Positive Achievement Inspired by the Principles of Conductive Education. Heather Last, the director of the centre for 21 years, was one of our New Zealand Bobath tutor trainees in the 1980s. However, she took a pathway in her career that orientated her more towards integrating conductive education with what she had learned in her occupational therapy and Bobath training, good assessment, handling with preparation of the child for function, and preparation and tasks linking closely together, teaching parents and others, and the use of appropriate supportive equipment as required. Heather ensured that her therapy staff at the PACE Centre are Bobath trained, and because of the ongoing training for all staff, there are 100 staff and 110 children at the centre, which she has developed from scratch, from having 6 kids in a little room in a little house, and this has developed into what a vision that she's seen. And so at this centre, knowledge is shared. The centre employs conductors from Hungary and from the Birmingham Institute in the UK. Therefore, the centre has an integrated approach with group programs, but individual work and therapy linking in. Supportive equipment, splints and adjuncts to enhancing function are used, as in any of our home and education settings, when children are seen by Bobath and other therapists, as these are considered an integral part of the management of children with cerebral palsy. I loved working at the PACE Centre with my Bobath hat on, circulating around to work with staff, children and carers in different settings, and the preschool groups and in their classrooms, teaching more analysis, problem solving, clinical reasoning and specific handling that they were not aware of so much, and all this learned from my Bobath perspective to help the staff integrate other aspects into their programs at the PACE Centre. So with the influences of knowing about conductive education and how it worked, with being a Bobath neurodevelopmental therapy tutor, this felt good to be able to try and liaise and harmonise these aspects together. I learned a lot working there and am grateful for the opportunity to work with such an open-minded group of people.